The room seemed to tilt as eyes turned. A ripple of disdain swept across the crowd. She must be part of the staff. Someone whispered loud enough to slice through the air. No, she's lost another, snickered sipping champagne, the glass flashing like a blade. And then it happened. A young server tray laden with crystal flutes accidentally bumped into her. Champagne erupted, splashing across Serena's dress in a sparkling stain. A small gasp rose from the crowd, half shock, half delight. The server muttered a stiff apology before vanishing into the tide of tuxedos. Serena blinked once, brushed her dress lightly, and straightened. No anger, no embarrassment, only a silence that felt heavier than words. It was only then that the rest of the room seemed to catch up. Serena Whitmore stood alone on the marble floor, wearing a simple cream linen dress that clung damply to her frame. No diamonds, no designer clutch. Only a canvas tote slung quietly over her shoulder. The chandeliers rained down golden light, but none of it touched her. Eyes swept over her like she was a stain on the floor. The fortress gates of luxury had slammed shut in an instant, and Serena was firmly on the outside. Drawing a calm breath, she moved forward anyway, her steps carrying her deeper into the glittering cold, toward a night that had already branded her as an outsider. The Empire Regency wasn't just a hotel, it was a living fortress. The marble underfoot gleamed like still water, cold and perfect, reflecting not just the chandeliers above, but the collective judgment of its patrons. Every corner was curated, every step calculated. The scent of white tuberose and aged leather floated in the air, weaving around guests who wore their bloodlines like armor. The walls themselves seemed to pulse with unspoken rules: belong or be erased. Clusters of heirs, heiresses, and tycoons stood in shimmering circles. Women in couture gowns clutched champagne flutes with manicured precision, their laughter light but edged. Men in tailored Brioni suits exchanged quiet nods over insider deals worth millions. It wasn't just wealth that ruled this place, it was pedigree legacy. And Serena Whitmore, with her simple linen dress and bare neckline, had trespassed into their sacred territory. A woman in a sapphire velvet gown gave Serena a look so slicing it could have drawn blood. Nearby, a man with a signet ring and silvered hair turned his back, pointedly shielding his conversation from the stain she represented. Two young socialites dripping in diamonds snapped a photo of Serena with subtle cruelty, fingers flying over their phones. She looks like she wandered in from housekeeping. One stage whispered, "They should really control who comes through the front doors." Another chimed in, her pearls glinting as she laughed. Serena heard it all. The words slid off her skin, but their sting burrowed deep. Still she didn't falter. She moved forward each step, silent on the marble, her shoulders square against the invisible storm. Somewhere under the curated glow of the chandeliers, the orchestra struck up a soft, glittering overture. The announcement would come soon, the reveal of the new owner of the Empire Regency chain. The air vibrated with anticipation and calculation. Serena kept walking, her canvas tote brushing against her side, the faint sound almost swallowed by the hum of polished ambition. They had already decided who mattered. They had already decided who didn't. But Serena? Whitmore had learned long ago. True belonging is not granted, it is claimed. She took a measured breath, feeling the weight of eyes slicing across her linen shoulders, and stepped deeper into the lion's den. Silent, steady, and carrying a strength none of them had begun to suspect. Serena moved with a grace that didn't belong to the marble halls or the gilded guests. It was not the stiff-backed poise born of generations of breeding. It was quieter, older, a calmness honed by storms, far fiercer than gossip. She drifted past the crystal buffet tables and velvet-draped alcoves, her steps unhurried, her canvas tote brushing against the silk and satin currents that tried to reject her presence. The staff noticed first. A bellboy, arms full of wine crates, glanced up and stilled for half a second longer than protocol allowed. His fingers tightened on the crates, not in disdain, but in respect. He couldn't explain. An older doorman near the entrance shifted slightly as Serena passed, a flicker of hesitation in his posture, as if he wanted to salute, but didn't dare. Not the wealthy, not the glittering. It was those who lived in the undercurrents of power who felt it, the ones who knew real strength when they saw it. Serena paused by an arched window framed with gold. Outside, the city lights glittered against the night like 1,000 muted stars. She watched them for a breath, unbothered by the sideways glances slicing at her back. Her reflection shimmered against the glass, simple, steady, undisturbed. There was a patience about her, a certainty that was jarring in a world fueled by urgency and show. She didn't clamor for attention. She didn't need to. Even her stillness was an act of quiet defiance, a declaration. You may not see me, but I will endure. The orchestra shifted into a sharper melody, a call to gather toward the center of the ballroom where the announcement would take place. The guests rippled like a living sea, their jewels and ambition catching the light. Serena turned away from the window and moved with them, not as one of them, but as something altogether different. She didn't know yet just how close her name was to setting the night on fire, nor how loudly the walls of Empire Regency would soon echo with regret. As she stepped closer to the heart of the ballroom, a voice would slice through the glittering hum, a voice full of venom, about to hurl the night into brutal spectacle. The ballroom was swelling with chatter, glittering with nerves and ambitions, when a sharp, shrill voice sliced through the air like a blade. There she is! Heads turned. Conversations dropped into brittle silence. Cecilia Crane stood at the top of the staircase, her sequined burgundy gown clinging to her statuesque frame, her manicured hand pointing directly at Serena Whitmore. You? What are you doing here? Her voice echoed off the marble walls, sharp and merciless. You don't belong, she shrieked, descending the stairs in a storm of righteous indignation. Each heel strike on the marble cracked louder than the last. Serena paused mid-step, her canvas tote brushing against her hip, as every face in the ballroom turned to her curious, delighted savage. Cecilia Crane stormed closer, her face twisted in mock pity and real rage. Look at you, she spat, dragging your filthy little tote around like you own the place. What did you sneak in through the service entrance? Ripples of laughter, cruel and eager, shivered through the crowd. Don't think you can fool anyone with your pathetic act, Cecilia sneered now, only a few feet from Serena, her fingers stabbing the air between them. You're nothing but charity trash, dressed up for a party you were never invited to. Gasps fluttered champagne, glasses froze mid-air. A woman in a sapphire gown whispered loudly enough for others to hear. Security should have dragged her out already. Cecilia wasn't finished. She stepped closer, still her voice lowering to a deadly purr. You thought you could hide under cheap linen and slip into our world. You thought nobody would notice the stain you leave just by existing. The room held its breath. No one intervened, no one looked away. They were witnessing a public execution, social, brutal, delicious. Serena said nothing. She only looked at Cecilia with an expression so composed, so devastatingly calm, it almost made the older woman falter. But pride is a hungry thing. Cecilia Crane gave one final flourish, grabbing a folded napkin from a nearby table. She tossed it at Serena's feet with theatrical disgust. Here, she hissed, wipe your shame off our floors. A scattered snicker broke loose, then more laughter rising like a cruel tide. Somewhere a smartphone camera flashed. A video was already recording, a caption already writing itself. As the security guards began to move, Serena simply adjusted her canvas tote and prepared to face the next humiliation. The moment the security guards approached the ballroom's energy shifted again, predatory now. Eager, two men in black suits, crisp and silent, moved toward Serena with rehearsed precision. They didn't shove, they didn't raise their voices, they didn't need to. Presence alone was enough. One guard extended a hand toward her palm, open, not offering, but commanding. Miss, we'll need you to come with us. Serena met his eyes for a fleeting second, calm, unblinking, before adjusting her canvas tote higher on her shoulder. She nodded once, no protest, no scene, only dignity. Gasps and delighted whispers rose like a tide as she began walking flanked by the guards. Phones emerged, faces gleamed with hunger for drama. A woman in emerald green lifted her phone, high, already live streaming. This is what happens when you try to crash the Empire. She sneered under her breath, her words caught by dozens of mics. Serena walked steadily between the sea of designer heels and polished Oxfords past tuxedos and gowns that shimmered like hostile waves. The marble floor, so slick and perfect, stretched endlessly ahead. Some guests laughed behind manicured hands. Others simply watched their silence, more cutting than words. No one stopped her. No one defended her. Near the doors, a man in a velvet jacket tossed a folded napkin at her feet like a crumpled flag. Another murmured, "Hope she enjoyed her last taste of luxury." Serena didn't flinch, she didn't look down. She kept walking. Every step was a testament not to humiliation, but to something deeper, an iron resilience masked in linen and silence. As she neared the grand revolving doors, the orchestra faltered, missing a beat. An imperfection almost no one noticed, but it rippled through the air. Nonetheless, a hush fell over the room. Eyes clung to her back like hooks, desperate for a final stumble, a final shame. But Serena moved like water slipping past stone. She pushed the heavy glass door open with one hand and stepped into the cool night air beyond. The guards halted at the threshold, as if an invisible line had been drawn. Inside, the crowd murmured, the excitement dimming into confusion, unease, and just as the doors began to close behind her, a shadow detached itself from the far end of the ballroom, moving toward the center stage with the slow, measured certainty of a coming storm. The grand doors hadn't even fully sealed shut behind Serena when a ripple passed through the ballroom. A man impeccably dressed, radiating a quiet, dangerous authority, stepped forward from the farthest corner. He wasn't hurried. He wasn't grandstanding. He simply moved like a tidal wave just beginning to rise. The orchestra faltered again, uncertain, as he crossed the polished marble with deliberate echoing steps. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, his silver-streaked hair combed back neatly, his sharp eyes scanning the crowd with chilling precision. No tie, no ostentation. Just a man who carried power, not as an accessory, but as second nature. Whispers broke out sharp and confused. "Who is that? Is he security? No, he's not staff." People shifted, craning their necks. The tension so smug a moment ago fractured into raw unease. The man moved with a slow, inevitable purpose toward the central dais, where the night's announcement had been moments from beginning. The MC, still clutching the microphone, stared at him, frozen. Without a word, the man took the microphone from his hand, effortless, commanding. The MC stepped back instinctively, as if relinquishing control was the most natural thing in the world. A hush fell deeper than any before. The chandeliers above flickered faintly, almost conspiratorially. The man lifted the microphone, his voice low, measured yet carrying to every gilded corner of the hall. "There has been," he said, pausing, letting the weight of the words settle, "an unfortunate misunderstanding tonight." The crowd, so ready to mock just minutes ago, now held their breath. "Before we continue," he went on, "it is imperative that we recognize the true guest of honor, the one individual without whom this evening would not exist." Another ripple, a collective flinch. Somewhere someone dropped a glass, the shatter muffled by the carpet. The man's gaze swept the room, cool, unhurried, merciless eyes dropped. Spines stiffened, and then he smiled, thin and dangerous. "It is my honor," he said slowly, "to introduce the rightful heir and the new owner of the Empire Regency Hotels." The words hung suspended in the stunned silence, and outside the glass doors, Serena Whitmore stood waiting silent, patient as the ballroom prepared to learn the cost of its arrogance. For a beat, no one moved. The man stood alone at the center, his words hanging in the air like a hammer about to drop. Then slowly the heavy double doors swung open once more, and Serena Whitmore stepped through. No guards, no grand fanfare, just her linen dress still damp at the hem from spilled champagne, canvas tote brushing against her side. Yet somehow now she looked impossibly larger, as if the entire ballroom had shrunk around her. Gasps broke like shattering glass. A few guests instinctively stepped backward as if proximity might expose them to contagion. "Cecilia?" Crane turned, her face draining of color. "No," she breathed, "no, that's impossible." But Serena was already walking forward, her steps as steady as before. Only now the marble itself seemed to hum under her feet. The man in the charcoal suit, the family lawyer, bowed his head slightly as she approached. "Miss Whitmore," he said, voice clear as a bell, "we've been waiting for you." He turned toward the stunned crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "it is my honor to confirm, by the last will and testament of Edward L. Monroe, founder and sole proprietor of Empire Regency Hotels, Miss Serena Whitmore is hereby named the sole heir and new owner of the entire Empire Regency chain." The words detonated like thunder. The crowd fractured, some gasping, some murmuring, some frozen entirely. Cecilia staggered, clutching at the nearest table to steady herself. The woman in the emerald dress dropped her phone, livestream abruptly ending in a black screen. The air crackled with disbelief, fear, shame. Serena reached the dais facing them all, not with anger, not with triumph, but with a silence more cutting than any scream. She looked at the faces twisted in horror, the very faces that had sneered, laughed, thrown their casual cruelty like knives. And she said nothing because there was nothing left to say. The family lawyer handed her a slim embossed folder, contracts, deeds, authority all wrapped into one. Serena took it with both hands, her fingers steady. The chandeliers above caught in the sheen of her linen dress and the glint of the seal pressed into the folder, illuminating her not like a beggar in a borrowed gown, but as the queen she had always been. She turned slightly, her gaze sweeping over them all one final time, 1,000 silent verdicts delivered with a single look. Then, with a quiet that screamed louder than applause, she stepped up onto the dais, claiming without a word everything that had once denied her. Serena stood at the dais holding the embossed folder, the weight of an empire fitting lightly in her hands. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The silence stretched thick and electric, filling every marble corner of the ballroom. It was a silence made not of fear, but of reckoning. The guests shifted uneasily in their designer shoes. The glittering armor they wore, now a pathetic echo against the absolute calm radiating from Serena. From the back of the room, someone began a hesitant, awkward clap. It died within 2 beats, smothered by the raw, unforgiving quiet. Cecilia Crane clutched the edge of a banquet table, her knuckles white, her sequined gown now seeming garish under the unforgiving chandeliers. She stared at Serena, not with anger anymore, but with naked, desperate regret. Across the room, faces twisted in forced smiles, desperate to salvage dignity where none remained. But Serena moved with no acknowledgement of them. She opened the folder, slowly, calmly extracted a slim document, the formal deed of transfer, and signed it with a steady hand. The flourish of the pen was louder than the crowd's breathing. When she finished, she closed the folder with a soft, deliberate snap. The finality of it echoed louder than any gavel in a courtroom. The master of ceremonies, pale and sweating, approached tentatively. "Miss Whitmore," he stammered, "would you like to say a few words?" The room leaned in, clinging to the hope of a speech, a scandal, a lifeline. But Serena only smiled faintly, a curve of the lips that neither forgave nor condemned. She lifted the microphone once, paused, and then simply said, her voice calm and cutting, "No words are necessary." The impact hit harder than any tirade could have. A shudder rippled through the crowd. Some lowered their eyes, others turned away entirely. It was over. Serena stepped down from the dais, the new owner not just of Empire Regency, but of every story, every narrative, every assumption that had been built against her. Cecilia staggered forward a half step, as if to beg, to plead, but she faltered, her mouth opening and closing without sound. No apology would matter now. The walls of the Empire Regency bore witness. The outcast had become the queen, and as Serena moved with silent grace toward the exit folder, tucked beneath her arm, the night cracked apart behind her, leaving only the ruins of those who had dared to mock her. Outside, the night wrapped Serena in cool, forgiving air. The marble steps beneath her felt no different now that she owned them. The sky above glittered with indifferent stars. Power, she realized, was never about titles, applause, or even revenge. True power was walking through fire and never letting it burn away your dignity. Serena paused at the top of the steps, the slim folder tucked beneath her arm, her linen dress rustling softly in the breeze. Behind her, the Empire Regency pulsed with nervous energy, the vultures feeding on the remnants of their own cruelty. She didn't look back. There was no need. She had not come here to crush anyone. She had not needed anger or speeches or public condemnation. All she had needed was to endure, to survive the small humiliations, the sneers, the betrayals, and to walk forward without letting them define her. And now, by doing nothing more than standing her ground, she had let their own arrogance undo them. Serena smiled faintly, a smile meant only for herself. This was victory, not a roar, not a sword, raised high, just a quiet, unshakable knowing. I belong, and I have always belonged. As she stepped down into the waiting night, her story was only beginning. Sometimes the greatest victories happen in silence, not with grand speeches, not with public applause, but with the quiet certainty of knowing who you are and never letting anyone steal it from you. Serena Whitmore's story is not just a tale of revenge. It's a reminder dignity is never loud. True strength doesn't need an audience. And sometimes, the sweetest justice is simply standing tall, while the world underestimates you until they can't anymore. Now it's your turn. Have you ever been underestimated? Have you ever walked through a room where you didn't seem to belong, only to realize you never needed their approval in the first place? We'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment below. Your journey might inspire someone who needs it today. And if Serena's story stirred something inside you, if it reminded you of your own quiet battles and your unshakable worth, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because this is just the beginning. Our next story, it's one you won't want to miss. Hit that notification bell. You never know when the next silent triumph will change everything.